Did I mention we're going to be in the 90s again today? We're looking for temperatures near 95 throughout much of the valley. It actually feels quite nice after being so cool for so long during the winter and spring. But again, if you're having problems with your air conditioning unit, you really need to give a telephone call to Ramsey Heating and Electric in Rupert. Whether you need repairs right away or just would like to avoid the problems in the future, call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. Make sure the job is done right the first time and set yourself up for a great summer. You can see them at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley or give them a telephone call. The number is 678-0459, Ramsey Heating and Electric. They sell warm winters and cool summers. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric. I was talking earlier with folks on the program, I think in the first 20 minutes or so, about some of the results of the primary elections yesterday. And of course, we did not see Donald Trump impacted in any way when you look at the final numbers from yesterday by his comments last week, which should be at least an eye opener again to the folks in mainstream media. It should also, I think, be a warning to the people in his own party that the American public doesn't really care what you think about somebody down the street. And when I was a kid growing up, I lived in a neighborhood that was, I guess, primarily Irish American. And it just, you looked up and down the street, and it just seemed that most of the people there had some sort of Irish ancestry. But we had people who lived next door. The family was named Collins. They moved out, and the Boyntons moved in. It was almost like it was an Irish thing. You had to be Irish to live in that house or have Irish ancestry. Because if you're born in this country, you're not Irish. You're an American. But then the Boyntons moved out, and the Makarowskis moved in, and so they were Polish. And then I had a lot of friends who had Italian ancestry at school, and guys all the time would rag on each other about their last names and their ancestry, and nobody took offense. I mean, it was it's just the way it was. But today, of course, it's like, oh well, you need to say you're sorry and resign from public life and move off into the forest and forage for those acorns Bill was talking about earlier. 926, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And I don't think most of America, this judge that Mr. Trump was taking on, now he was born in this country, but his parents came here apparently. I saw this morning. A trusted friend of mine said his parents came here illegally. And so he is a citizen, but mom and dad obviously broke the law. Number two, somebody said, well, he was criticized for belonging to La Raza, which translates as the race. Those are the people looking to reconquest, if you will, California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. And somebody said, no, he belongs to a law organization called La Raza Legal Organization or something along those lines. Well, that still means the Race Legal Organization, and that organization advocates to get people into positions of power who are of Latin ancestry, but to discriminate as well against those people of Anglo ancestry. So Mr. Trump may have a very good point about this guy. Now, maybe people don't think it was eloquent that he referred to him as a Mexican at one point, but he's right that the guy may dang well be prejudicial when he's sitting on the bench. You're on the air with Bill Colley at 927. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. I've been paying attention for the last few years, and let me say I'm LDS, and I've been listening to Utah stations and one in Idaho Falls, and there's a hatred for Trump because he's just not eloquent, and he just don't tell you what you want to hear like the rest of them smiling faces. But if these guys if they vote for Hillary or don't vote just because they don't like the way Trump handles this, we're dead. We're done. And I just pray to God that these guys come around and get over their egos. We got to do the right thing here. We're going down, and we're not going to be on cruise. We're going to speed up to 100,000 miles an hour. And she's going to do it to us, man. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you. And that's well said. The other option is not a good option. And all of the talk about, well, we could still vote libertarian for Gary Johnson. I was watching The Five last night. And, despite the fact that Gary Johnson has been getting a lot of attention from people who aren't, he doesn't like conservatives. He's made that clear. And nobody knows who he is outside of his home state of New Mexico. Again, he will not be a factor this fall. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Talking about this where you were talking about the judge being the lawyers of La Raza. Yesterday morning when I woke up, I turned on the radio and George Noory was on there. He was interviewing two guys who wrote a book called See Something, Don't Say Anything. It's applying to what the government has said, see something, say something. And George Noory stated that the head of Al-Qaeda was part of the lawyers for Mohammedan or something like that. And, everything they're doing here is anti-law. It's written in American law that any law contrary to the law of God is no law at all. When they turn us away from God's law, this is what we wind up with.
And I thank you for the call, too. And I'm glad you referenced George Noory, because George Noory knows a little bit about what he's referencing. While he is of Arab ancestry, he's of Christian Arab ancestry. His family, a big part of that population that has settled in this country over the course of many years because they were driven out of that part of the world. So there you go. There's a guy who knows exactly what he's talking about when he warns of the dangers. Bill Colley with you. It's 9:30. We've got more on this and some economic news as well that's not good. 75. Some of you who are Facebook connections of mine, I don't say Facebook friends. I know that's what Facebook says, but a lot of you I've never actually met. I have 1,500 people who are supposedly Facebook friends. Now, I may have met 200 of them. I mean, I thank you for signing up because I post a lot of material there that I never even get to when I'm on the air. And this is an opportunity for me to, if you will, since I don't have a 4 or 5 hour show, what I can do is just share other things that I think are important somewhere like Facebook. And I've been trying over the last couple of weeks to do a little bit of a daily preview of our program. I go live on Facebook, and then there's usually a video that's 10 to 15 minutes long that I do before the beginning of the regular show. And I referenced some of these things during my conversation there this morning. These are two pieces from the op-ed pages at the Washington Times, which, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is a conservative alternative in Washington to some of the more liberal media in that town. Donald Lambro, who's a syndicated columnist, he says, in the 8th year of Barack Obama's presidency, the liberal national news media continues its shameful cover-up of his failed economic policies. The latest and most stunning example of that duplicitous shell game came last Friday, the day the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics released its monthly jobs report. The Washington Post ran a front-page story written the day before under the headline, Job Market at Long Last Shows Signs of Resilience. They were talking about the 4.7% unemployment rate, which, of course, that's a number of how many people are collecting jobless benefits. But after 26 weeks, you can't collect them anymore. So you drop off the rolls. These numbers could be 1 in 5 Americans. A measly 38,000 jobs, he writes, in a shrinking economy that had all but stopped growing last year, turning in a pathetic 1.4% economic growth rate in the fourth quarter, and an even more anemic 0.8% growth. That's less than 1. In the first 3 months of this year, he says, clearly this wasn't an economy firing on all cylinders as the Post falsely described it. So how did the Post handle the gloomy jobs report the next day? Again, they reported the unemployment rate, 4.7% on the front page. The following day, with the 38,000 jobs created, they buried it on page A9. A9. And then Peter Marisi, who's an economist, he has a column at the same newspaper. He said a soft jobs market could help Trump win the White House if he presents a coherent program to fire up growth and put substance into his promise to restore American greatness. So he said really all he needs to do is flesh that out a little bit more in the coming months. And he said, doesn't matter what the mainstream media is saying. Just keep in mind, I heard a comment made this morning on television. One of the hosts of a program, it might have been on Fox and Friends, said, well, back in 1980, if the election had been held in September, Jimmy Carter would have won. But he didn't win because Ronald Reagan had a couple of more months to really stretch it out and tell people, look, the economy's really bad, no matter what Jimmy Carter's fellow travelers and media are telling you. And so people can figure that out on their own, especially when they're in a breadline. 937. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Well, it's sure obvious the mainstream media is a cheerleading section and will be campaigning full steam ahead for Hillary. But like you say, Trump has an opportunity here, and one thing is he represents a lot of people that are out of work, as you're saying, are wanting to work but can't because of all these trade agreements and so forth. But Hillary is a Linskyite. She did her thesis on him, and she will totally finish off what Obama's started and almost completed by himself in this transformation of America. And Alinsky, of course, Saul Alinsky, wrote the book Rules for Radicals. He dedicated it to Lucifer, meaning Satan. And so this is what we're up against. We're against spiritual darkness in high places.
Do you know that there was a story today? I got to share this with you quickly.
Sure.
The Obama White House has appointed a new religious czar, and the person's last name is Satin, Satan though still, and the person happens to be a member of the LGBT community and is going to be advising the country on religious matters, faith matters.
Oh, that's just wonderful. That's great news for everybody. yeah, unbelievable. I mean, folks, you get up. You've got to get up out of your easy chair, get to the phone, get your internet, we have the ability to turn this thing around. Reagan didn't have the ability to have an internet like we do now, and talk radio certainly between people like yourself and Hannity and Rush and so forth. Reagan didn't have those things, and yet he was able to turn this thing around from a negative. And I think Trump really has that ability. But right now, we've got to get the Republicans get off their high horse and say, "Oh, Trump's not perfect. We've got to get a better candidate." Well, I can guarantee you, if we get Hillary, the country, as one of your callers pointed out, is done.
Yeah,
we will be done. There will be the Supreme Court justice will be totally in the can for socialism. Gun control will be completed. I mean, we won't have any freedoms left, and it's just critical that we get behind Trump, regardless of whether he was our candidate or not. So anyway, it's a serious condition because I've been studying this thing a long time, and of course, all of the big stuff coming down from the top comes from the United Nations. They've always been communist. Most of these education, refugee programs, all coming right out of the United Nations, which has been controlled by communists, the Linsky types, all for years. I mean, since
Adrian, got to let you run because I got a break coming up. But thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you very much.
Take care, sir. And of course, he makes a great point. If we have 4 years, just 4 years of Hillary, that national debt will be about $35 trillion by 2020. Ouch. This is the story I was referring to when I was chatting with our last caller. Comes from the Daily Signal. That's the publication of the Heritage Foundation. Last month, President Obama named Barbara Satan, a man who identifies as a woman, to the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Satan is the Assistant Faith Works Director for the LGBTQ Task Force, and it sounds bacon, lettuce, and tomato, right? And a member of the United Church of Christ, where she, I guess, or Shim, or it, served on the church's National Executive Council. The denomination is among the nation's most open to the LGBT community. Satan has been the chair of... last week the president said that he made this bathroom rule because he said, all in my reading of the scriptures, it's the golden rule, and we need to do that. Why is it whenever liberals... Now, cite this golden rule for me, by the way, too. But why is it when liberals want to try to get away with something, they claim it's part of their faith? And yeah, when it comes to us, if we were to cite... Let's say we started citing rules from Leviticus, and would they go along with us? It's okay for them to say, well, it's my religious faith compelled me to do it. But for the rest of you, like the Little Sisters of the Poor, you can't have your religious faith. No. 944, Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com, 736-0300, the telephone number. We're at 77, on our way into the mid-90s, at least before the day is over. And before I'll get to my next caller in just a moment, just want to remind you, my friend Dr. Eric F. Jones is looking for some new patients. He has a holistic, systemic, approach to wellness, and he's been doing this now for almost 25 years. He has a master's and doctorate degree in marriage and family therapy. Dr. Eric F. Jones uses methods of alternative healing, naturopathy, medicinal herbs, nutrition, sound waves, intellectual and cognitive self-regulation, and napathy that can help remedy and manage mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual challenges. He's currently accepting new patients, and he has evening and Saturday appointments available. His telephone number is 731-7178. Can I mention that again? His telephone number, 731-7178. And he's on Facebook as well. Eric F. Jones, Ph.D., mental health and wellness therapist. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. A couple of thoughts. Earlier you mentioned Hillary and Benghazi. She had all her military resources, and she couldn't keep 4 people safe in Benghazi. But what is worse, what was when President Reagan was president, he found out that a couple of our soldiers were killed by Gaddafi, and he went over and bombed Gaddafi's house. But Bill Clinton, when our soldier was dragged through the streets in his underwear in Somalia, he retreated. And this gave the go-ahead for the USS Cole bombing, the 2 embassy bombings, and Osama bin Laden said that the U.S. was just a paper tiger.
And thank you for the call. We don't have people willing in government to take that hard edge any longer when someone does something bad to us. And I want to thank him for chiming in. It was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was taking a nap one afternoon. I don't take many naps, but that particular day, I felt like I needed one. And I was in bed for about 20 minutes and the telephone rang, and by the time I actually got to it, the caller had just left a message instead. And it was a message from Colonel William Fox. Not yet been on the air with me, but maybe we should have him on the show someday. He keeps somewhat of a low profile now, but who is Colonel Fox? He is the fellow who planned that raid on Libya for Ronald Reagan. And he now is you'd never know this. I was in a Tea Party group with him many, many years ago. He's long retired, but he runs a gardening center. That is a shrubbery and plants and the like. And when you meet him, he's got round glasses and rimless glasses, and he talks like a college professor in just a very calm sort of manner. And you'd never realize that. My friend Steve Heil, who was Colonel Steve Heil, who was on the show with us last Friday, I said to Steve one day, I said, it's hard to believe that Will was actually involved with doing stuff like that. And he says, let me put it this way. He said, Will comes across as a very calm guy, but he's the type of guy who can really mess you up. Muammar Gaddafi learned that back in the 1980s. 948, Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 76 right now. And I thank you for joining us on the program today. There's a caller in the last segment of the program, or a couple of segments ago, mentioned the destruction of this country if we have 4 years of Hillary Rodham Clinton. That if you get 4 years, Buck Sexton said it last week at the Idaho Republican Convention quite well. He said if you get 4 years, you get 8 years. And I think he repeated that as well yesterday when he was filling in for Rush Limbaugh right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX. If you get more years of Hillary Clinton, you get more years of porous borders. This is out of the Washington Times. Stephen Dinan, who's a great investigative reporter. Illegal immigrants are kidnapping children and bringing them across the border, hoping to appear to be families so they can take advantage of lax enforcement policies, the Obama White House told a federal appeals court on Tuesday. So is this true? Well, let's get a little bit more deep into this. Leon Fresco, a deputy assistant attorney general who handles immigration cases, made the stunning claim as he defended the administration's policy of detaining illegal immigrant parents and children caught traveling together as they jumped the border. After a federal judge last year ordered the families quickly released, Mr. Fresco said it served as an enticement for kidnapping. Quote, when people now know that when I come as a family unit, I won't be apprehended and detained. We now have people being abducted so that they can be deemed as family units so that they can avoid detention, unquote. Mr. Fresco told the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Ninth Circuit, as you know, is very despicable. Well, we're not supposed to criticize judges. Mainstream media wouldn't like that. This goes on. The writer says he did not back up the claim in court, though, and did not respond to a follow-up email seeking comment. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency that handles detention and deportation, declined to comment, citing the ongoing case, while Customs and Border Protection, which guards the border, did not respond to a request for comment. But Peter Schei, the lawyer who argued in court on behalf of the families and is in touch with hundreds of families as part of the lawsuit, said there's no evidence to back up Mr. Fresco's claim. So they're trying to lie now. They're claiming that, well, when these people come here and they hop the fence, they've kidnapped these kids, so we have to make sure they stay here so we can sort all of this out. It's not true. It's just the White House looking for another excuse to keep these people here longer so they could suck up more of our tax money and eventually get some citizenship, get granted amnesty, and then vote as Democrats so they can even suck up more of your hard-earned cash. Just something I wanted to share. And I see some stories some days, and I'll read a story and I'll say, that's bad enough. But then I'll see an entirely different story in an entirely different newspaper, and I'll make a connection. This is from the Washington Post, Pravda on the Potomac. And the headline is, the biggest business story of the next 5 years. So, you've got all of these illegal immigrants coming here, right? And they're all feeding at the public trough, if you will. Connor Sen, the writer of this story at the Washington Post. Now, is it related? Well, you be the judge of this. At a current total employment level of 143.9 million people, that would mean if everyone, I guess, was working who could be working in this country. The writer says this means we need an additional 550,000, that's more than half of a million, to 600,000 construction workers. In other words, he's saying the country is in the next 5 years facing a huge shortage of construction workers. This is a problem, he writes, because we're already near record lows for construction unemployment. How are we going to find them? 87 to 88% of construction workers are men, a ratio that has not changed in 25 years. So we're largely talking about men that we need. Now, this is a long story with a lot of charts trying to make its point. Where are they going to get all of these men? Well, they're going to have them hop the border, and then they're going to tell them, hey, welcome to the good old USA. Gosh, golly gee, you can go do drywall and undercut somebody else. So they're claiming that there's a shortage of construction workers, even with millions of Americans who are still looking for work. They're claiming that there's a shortage of Washington, D.C. just yesterday or Monday voted to raise its minimum wage to $15. This is a recipe for disaster. They bring these people here. Then they say we have to pay higher wages to everyone. That means more people are going to be working under the table. That means more of the people working under the table are going to be here as immigrants, many of them illegal immigrants. You understand what we're seeing take place here? So the Washington Post, which is a mouthpiece for the Democrat Party, is setting this up, saying, "Wow, we have a shortage of construction workers, and gee golly gosh, we'll need more of them. So where will they come from? Oh, gosh, we'll just eliminate the border altogether, and then problem solved." You see what they're up to? 9:54. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yes, I'm repeating myself here, but it bears repeating. You look at the economy of Los Angeles, the underground economy itself is massive. And these people don't pay taxes. They're not insured. There's no way that anybody monitors anything. These the OSHA, whatever is supposed to be keeping an eye on these poor, helpless workers, couldn't give a what. And so you see, this is the kind of chaos that is occurring in Los Angeles at this point. I mean, 2 million. I mean, I can't even remember the figures now, Bill. I'd have to dig them up. But it's unbelievable. But this is the kind of thing that's coming our way, and this kind of chaos will. I mean, we are getting hammered from every direction, aren't we? I'm going to hang up. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for the call. And as I mentioned yesterday, legislators in California last week voted to extend Obamacare benefits to illegal immigrants. Now, in order for this to happen, technically, then they could not get Obamacare subsidies. Subsidies mean what the money the government would give them to pay for, whatever else costs they had to go with their Obamacare, because the law says, that is the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare to most people. The law says illegal immigrants that they're not that they are not entitled in any way to that what you'd call handout. It's government welfare is what it is, but it says they're not entitled to the subsidy. Except that buried deep within, remember, we have to pass the bill so we know what's in the bill. Remember, there was a person who said that?
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
She's from California, right? Remember she said that? Well, guess what was buried in that 2,200 pages of that Obamacare bill? you can't apply as a state for a waiver from that restriction on illegal immigrants getting a subsidy. So California, which has an estimated population of 39 million, and probably in that estimate, they would say 10 million of them may be here illegally. My guess is there's probably 25 million people here illegally. How can they count them? But California wants to give them an option to get Obamacare so they can be insured. But then California wants to turn around and give them that Obamacare subsidy, which is money that the government collects from, well, working Americans, taxpayers. You. So there are 25 million potential illegal aliens in California who could be sucking up your tax dollars to help pay for their Obamacare. And then get on the rolls with that too as well. Folks, don't you understand what they're doing to you? They're turning you into a third world citizen in your own country in order to do this so they can get more votes from these people and then bring even more of these people in here to get even more votes from them so they can continue to take from you and bleed you dry. And yet last week I read a story from one of the big newspapers that said Americans just are hopefully inadequately prepared for retirement. They haven't saved anywhere near enough. Why haven't they saved any money? Because they're giving it all away in these programs to illegal immigrants and others. Americans can't afford to send their children to college, so their children go off and borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars, which they can never repay. Why can't Americans afford to send their children to college? Because they're paying the freight for everyone else across the planet. And you'll get more of this with Hillary Clinton. And the media right now is trying to tell you, never Trump, never Trump, Trump mean, Trump racist, Trump bigot. Well, at least Trump says this is going to come to an end. I don't care if he's got horns growing from his forehead. I'll vote for him. 9:58, Bill Colley with you on Top Story saying have a great day. God willing, and the creek don't rise. They'll allow me to come back and do this all over again tomorrow. 10 o'clock news is up next from Fox. Again, Rush Limbaugh is away this week, but the Rush Limbaugh program is on the way. And then Sean Hannity following Fox News at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Glenn Beck following the news from Fox at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And Dave Ramsey tonight. It's 77 on our way into the 90s today. Stay cool.